Hello everyone and welcome to our Bet Yosef Shiur, where we continue to explain the background behind each halacha in the Shulhan Aruch. We're learning today Siman Pei Tet Seif Het, and we'll continue to Siman Sadi. Seif Het discusses what aspects of tefillah take precedence. Is it the kavanah of tefillah? Is it the zman of tefillah? Are there other aspects that take precedence when we are in a situation where we can't have all of them? Is it better to concentrate on the tefillah or to pray at the proper time in the proper order? The Gemara tells us that when Abu Shmuel and Levi would travel, they would pray the Amidah early in the morning and say Kirat Shema later when the time of Kirat Shema came. Their opinion is supported by a Beraita and the opinion of Tanakama and the Beraita as follows. Ditanya, Hamashkim Latzedaderet, Mivim lo shofar v'tokea, lulav menanea, Megillah v'koreh. וכשיגיע זמן קריאת שמע, קורא, השכין לשב בקרון, מתפלל. וכשיגיע זמן קריאת שמע, קורא. The Braita is teaching us that if a person is doing mitzvot, lulav, shofar, is doing it early in the morning, he does the mitzvah early. When the time of Kirat Shema comes, he reads Kirat Shema later. If he's going on the wagon, on the karon, he prays the Amidah, and then when the time Kirat Shema comes later, he says Kirat Shema. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar argues, and he says, Ben kach uben kach koreh kirat shema mitpalel kedei sheismoch geula letfilah. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar holds that you should wait until the time of kirat shema in order to pray, so that you can connect the concept of Yitziat Mitzrayim, which is the geula, and the tfilah, meaning that shema and the brachot of kirat shema should be attached to the Amidah, which can only be done at the time of kirat shema. Before we discuss whether we are posek like Abu Shmuel and Levi or like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, there is an added point brought by the Bet Yosef and the Tosafot and the other Rishonim that we need to discuss. The Gemara brings a testimony about Rav Ashi, who was the main lecturer on the Shabbat before the holiday, probably giving a shiur about the Halchot Yom Tov, and he didn't project his voice to the crowd. Rather, there was a person who was called a Turgeman who heard what Rav Ashi said, and he projected it to the crowd. The shiur started at around sunrise. It lasted for a few hours. Rav Ashi wouldn't pray before the shiur. Rather, he would pray biyahid in his chair while the interpreter was saying over what Rav Ashi told him moments before. And he would pray again later once he got home. His fellow rabbis asked, "Why didn't you pray at home before the shiur like Abu Shmuel and Levi?" Rav Ashi answered that I didn't see the older generation of rabbis, they didn't do it. So therefore, since I didn't see the older generation doing it, I followed their custom and don't pray early. Seemingly, Rav Ashi is a clear proof that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. And in fact, the Bahag, the Baal Halachot Gedolot, says we see from here that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, not to pray the Amidah biyachid earlier at home, rather to pray later with the brachot kirat shema. However, the Bet Yosef brings other explanation of Rav Ashi's custom, which can work together with the opinion of Abu Shmuel and Levi. Firstly, Rav Hai Gaon explains that Rav Ashi was merely saying that on the days of the big lecture, the Rigla, the older generation of rabbis wouldn't pray early. But on days that they needed to travel, they would pray early. So therefore, there's no proof. And since we don't have a proof from the Maaseh of Rav Ashi, we don't have a proof of how the rabbi conducted himself, so we revert back to our regular rules of halacha. Yahid v'rabim, halacha kerabim, majority rules, and therefore, since Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar argues on the Tanakama, halacha is like the Tanakama, which is the opinion of the majority of the rabbis, since Abu Shmuel and Levi also agree to pray early. Additionally, the Rosh adds that Rav Ashi didn't have an issue of praying with concentration in his chair, which is much different than a person praying while traveling. Also, Rav Ashi's main prayer was later in the day once he got home. Therefore, the Bet Yosef concludes and says that the Rosh and the Rashba agreed to these explanations, so does Rabbeinu Hananel, and therefore the Bet Yosef says, Ha'achin aktina. Before we get to the bottom line, the psak of the Shulhan Aruch, just 2 points that were mentioned in the Bet Yosef. First, Rashi explained that Abu Shmuel and Levi held that you should pray at home while standing, even before the day began, meaning even before dawn. All of the poskim argue on Rashi, and they hold that we're talking about after dawn, that shaharit cannot be prayed before dawn. And that's how we explain the sugya according to the majority of opinions, but it's important to point out Shitat Rashi. Secondly, Rashba says that the Gemara in Brachot Daf Het says that the time of Kirat Shema is dawn. He brings the Gemara, Mishna Berura says that Kirat Shema can be read at dawn. So what's the question here? Pray the entire tefillah with Shema from dawn and on. Rashba answers that the Gemara Daf Het is discussing traveling in a dangerous area where concentration is impossible even for a moment. And that's why one is allowed to read Shema from such an early time. However, our sugya is talking about a much more standard and safe journey. We're reading a few psukim of Shema with kavanah is definitely feasible, but standing up and having kavanah is not. So that's why you could read Shema on the way, but the Amidah, it's harder to read on the way. So that's why they said to pray the Amidah earlier while standing at home, and then say Shema later at the right time while on the way. This question is also brought in the Beit Yosef in Siman Nun Tet by the laws of Kirat Shema, and he also gives two other reasons for a chiluk in the sugyot ayin sham. Maran Siman Pei Tet Seif Het reads as follows: B'shat hadehak kigon shetzarich le'ashkim laderech yachol le'itpalel misha'ala amud hashahar v'yamtim milikro Kirat Shema ad she'yagia zmana. Says Maran, when you're in a dire situation, obviously we know from the Beit Yosef it's not a totally dire situation, but it's a time where you could pray the Amidah from Amud Shahar and say Kirat Shema later. Im efshar se'edz the Rama ad she'yagia zmana im efshar likro Kirat Shema laderech ha'enu she'yitkaven b'pasuk rishon k'mo she'nitpaer le'el b'siman nun het. And he's hinting to what the Rashba said, that we're talking about a situation where you can say Kirat Shema on the way. However, if you wouldn't be able to, if you're in a truly difficult situation, then Kirat Shema would even be allowed early. Maran is posek like Shmuel and Levi that the Amidah standing with kavanah is more important than praying on the way, than being somech yo'olah l'tfilah. We now proceed to Siman Sadi, which discusses many aspects of tefillah, such as where and how to pray, praying with the minyan, and other similar halachot. Occasionally, the Torah gives us a broad general idea of the halachot that he's about to discuss. And here is a clear example. The Torah says, Hamikpalel tzarich shiachin makom l'tfilato v'shiachin la begada v'gufo u'machshavto. And then he continues and says, makom ketzad, and he starts with our sugya. Sometimes this broad idea gives us a general idea of where we're going, what we're about to accomplish in our learning, and these halachot will take us all the way through to Siman Kuf Dalit. The first few halachot in this Siman discuss praying at different heights. The Torah brings a Tosefta, which says that a person should not show any signs of haughtiness as he stands in prayer in front of Borei Olam. As David HaMelech says in Tehillim, V'ma'amakim keraticha Hashem, which literally means from the depths of my heart, the depths of my sorrow, of my despair, of my tzara. But here it means that one should not be standing on something like a chair or a stool when he prays to Hashem. The Beit Yosef brings many Rishonim who say that if it's for a reason, such as the Hazan who wants to project his voice, or for an elderly person who may need to stand on a soft cushion, it's allowed. And these are reasons that are not due to haughtiness. Another exception to the rule brought by the Torah from the Rambam is that if the area is a domain unto itself, meaning it's 4 by 4 amot and it's 3 tefachim high, it's its own domain and therefore it's not a problem. Or if it's surrounded by barriers, by dividers, by mechitzot, even if the area is less than 4 by 4 amot, since it's its own domain, it's allowed. The Beit Yosef brings that there is discussion whether or not standing on a cushion that's less than 3 tefachim, which is around 9 inches, is allowed. He brings the opinion of Mari Abu Hab, who says it's a problem because for a different reason. He says someone could lose concentration in the prayers as he may be afraid that he will fall, and therefore he says it's a problem. There's another opinion that says only from Eset Tefachim and on there's an issue. However, the Beit Yosef brings the opinion of the Rambam, who says that under 3 tefachim is allowed, and over 3 tefachim is asur. And he says the following words, Ve'anu en lanu ela divrei harabam zichrono livracha de'asar begavoa gimel tefachim. We hold like the Rambam, which obviously is the Pesach here of Maran, and it's also a recurring theme that follows throughout the Bet Yosef and throughout the Shulhan Aruch, as the Bet Yosef views the Rambam's Pesakim as paramount. The Shulhan Aruch reads as follows: Hamitpalel lo ya'amod lo al gabe mita velo al gabe kiseh velo al gabe safsal v'Rama edzin v'afilu enam givohim gimel. We'll continue and we'll come back to the Rama. Velo al gabe makom gavoa. Maran continues. Velo al gabe makom gavoa. Ela im ken haya zaken o holeh o shehaya kavanato le'ashmiya latzibur. Maran brings the exceptions and continues in Sif Bet. שיעור מקום גבוה שאמרו 3 טפחים. היה גבוה 3 ויש בו 400 על 400, הרי הוא כעלייה ומותר להתפלל בו, וכן אם היה מוקף בחיצות, אף על פי שאין בו 4 על 4, מותר להתפלל בו, שאין גובהו ניכר, כיוון שהלק רשות, which is the opinion of the Rambam that if it's its own domain, it's not a problem. Now, the Rama adds in the words of Mahari Abu Haf. The Rama says in Seif Aleph, "Va'afilu inam givuhin gimel," meaning that the kiseh, the mitah, and the safsal Maran are talking about is even less than 3 tefahim. This is the opinion of the Mahari Abu Haf. As we learn the Bet Yosef, it sounds like the Rambam and the Mahari Abu Haf are arguing. However, the Rama says the words of Mahari Abu Haf, and he doesn't even say yesh cholkim. It seems that he understood the words of Mahari Abu Haf to be the opinion of Maran. Now, we do know, as we've mentioned before, that sometimes the Rama will add in words into Maran's Lashon without saying Yesh Cholkim, even though it is Mahloket. However, if we take a deeper look at the Darkei Moshe Aruch, which is the sefer that the Rama wrote, and he brought all the opinions just like in the Bet Yosef. If we notice in the Darkei Moshe, things are organized differently than the Bet Yosef. First, he brings the Mahloket between the Rambam and the Orchot Chaim. The Orchot Chaim holds that until 10 tefachim is allowed. The Rambam says it's only allowed until 3 tefachim. And on that he says the Lashon of the Bet Yosef, En lano ela divrei Rambam. And then he continues, and then he brings the Mahari Abu Haf, who says that under 3 tefachim is an issue of kavanah, that you might fall and disrupt your concentration. According to the way that Darkei Moshe sets up the poskim, he learns that the Rambam and the Mahari Abu Haf are not arguing, and therefore he will hold that this is agreed upon by everyone, and the Mahari Abu Haf is halacha. However, if we look carefully at the Bet Yosef, it does seem that there's a mahloket. And if we look at Seif Bet and Aleph together, where Maran says, Amit palel lo yamod al gabe kiseh, and then he says in Seif Bet, Shiur makom gavoa she'amru 3 tefachim. So obviously it sounds like Seif Bet is explaining that Seif Aleph is talking about 3 tefachim. The Aharonim, who hold like the Rama, will explain what the difference between Seif Aleph and Seif Bet is in order to fit with the Rama. However, if we look carefully from at the Bet Yosef's perspective and the Shulhan Aruch, it seems that Maran does not hold like the Mahari Abu Haf. In fact, the great Aharonim, the Ma'amar Mordechai, and the Bach do argue what Da'at Maran is here. The Bach says it, like we said at the Bet Yosef, and he says that the Rama is not the halacha. However, the Ma'amar Mordechai does say that the Bet Yosef will hold of the Mahari Abu Haf. Thank you for joining. Be'ezrat Hashem will continue the next shiur in Siman Sadi, Seif Gimel. Besorot Tovot for everyone and the entire Am Yisrael.